She thought I was asleep, so I heard everything. Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Confessions. Today's story is, well, I wish it wasn't mine, but it is, and it starts at exactly 2:12 a.m. when my life cracked in half without a sound, without a warning. The house was silent, except for the humming radiator and the occasional shift of wind outside. I was in bed, facing the wall, eyes closed but wide awake. You ever pretend to sleep just so your brain will shut up? That was me, just trying to disappear into the sheets. That's when she came in, quiet, barefoot. I felt the dip in the mattress. She thought I was out cold. My breathing must have fooled her. She wasn't alone. She brought her phone, and she called him, right there in bed with me inches away, pretending to dream. I could hear the smile in her voice as she whispered, "He's asleep. You can talk." I don't know what I expected her to say. Maybe work gossip. Maybe something harmless. Instead, I heard, "I can't do this much longer. I hate being here. I hate being around him." Couldn't breathe. She laughed quietly, but it wasn't nervous. It was free, like she had unzipped her mask for the first time all day. It's like living with a sponge. He soaks up all the energy in the room. Everything feels dead when he's near me. And then she said the one thing I'll never forget. "I'd rather be alone forever than spend one more year pretending I love him." He asked something, I don't remember what. I couldn't hear clearly over the sound of my heart clawing its way up my throat. She whispered back, "No, he has no idea. He's weak. He'd fall apart if he did." I almost laughed. Not out loud, God, no. But something in me cracked, because I realized right then, she wasn't wrong. I was weak. I didn't get up. I didn't confront her. I waited until she fell asleep beside me. Her breathing softened, her back turned, like nothing happened. At 4:38 a.m., I slipped out of bed, put on socks that didn't match, took a bag I hadn't packed, and left without making a sound. I didn't leave a note. I didn't even take my wallet. I just walked. Now I'm here, in a place I won't name, wearing yesterday's clothes, rubbing my thumb over the ring I took off in a diner bathroom stall, watching the sunrise and wondering, what do you do when the person who sleeps beside you every night has already mourned your absence? And what would you do if I told you this wasn't the worst part? That comes in part 2. And trust me, she has no idea what's coming. When I left that night, I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout. I didn't cry in the hallway or break anything dramatic like they do in movies. I just opened the front door like I was stepping out to check the weather. No shoes, no plan, just gone. The sky was beginning to lighten with that cold, silvery blue that happens right before sunrise. I remember thinking, this is what it feels like to be erased. Slowly, quietly, like a smudge on glass. I walked until my legs felt like they didn't belong to me anymore. I stopped at an old gas station off Millbrook Highway, the kind that still has a flickering light above the door and coffee that tastes like burnt rubber bands. I sat at the plastic table inside, shivering in my hoodie, pretending to read a crumpled newspaper just so the cashier wouldn't ask if I was okay. I wasn't. At 8:02 a.m., I finally checked my phone. No calls. One text. From her. It said, "Did you take the blue folder from the dresser?" Not "where are you?" Not "I'm worried." Just that. Folder. I laughed, loud enough for the guy mopping the floor to look over at me. And that's when it hit me. I had seen a blue folder, right before I walked out. It was lying half under the dresser, barely poking out. I thought nothing of it at the time, but now something in me twisted. I don't know why I cared. Maybe because she did. I went back. Don't judge me. I know it sounds weak, but I needed to see what it was. I knew she'd be out teaching her class at the studio, and I still had a spare key in my coat pocket. The same coat she bought me for Christmas last year. The tag was still in the inside pocket. It said, "Warm like a hug." The house felt smaller when I stepped in. Dimmer, like it knew I didn't belong anymore. I walked straight to the bedroom, pulled the folder out, and froze. Inside were printed emails. Dozens. Maybe more. All from one name, Brandon. I didn't know a Brandon, but clearly Ramona did. Each message was flirty. intimate. One even had a list. Things I want to do when he's finally gone. There was a flight confirmation, a hotel reservation, a set of dates that lined up exactly with the yoga retreat she'd told me about next weekend. She wasn't going to a retreat. She was going away with him. And here's the kicker. She'd booked it months ago. Months. My hands were shaking. Not out of rage, not even betrayal. I think I was just stunned. Because while I was out here trying to be the wallpaper to her world, she was planning her exit like a vacation itinerary. I stuffed everything back into the folder and walked out. Not because I didn't want her to know I'd seen it, but because suddenly I wanted her to wonder. I wanted her to come home, reach under the dresser, and feel that flash of cold panic when it wasn't there. I wanted her to question what I knew, what I'd do, who I'd tell. I didn't feel powerful, but for the first time in years I felt unpredictable. She called me that afternoon. I let it ring, then again, and again. I finally answered on the fifth call. All she said was, "Can we talk?" I waited a beat, then asked, "Why do you miss the folder more than me?" Silence. Then she hung up. And in that moment, I smiled for the first time in 3 days. Not because I was okay, but because for once, she wasn't either. But the story's not over. Not even close. Because later that night, someone else called me. Someone who knew exactly what Brandon had done. And what Ramona was really hiding. I didn't recognize the number. The screen just lit up as I sat on the edge of a lumpy motel bed, staring at a wall that hadn't seen a coat of paint since the late 90s. It rang once, twice. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "Is this Ellwood?" the voice said. I froze. No one calls me that unless they know me from something official. Most people just say Woody. This voice wasn't familiar. It was calm, older maybe, but not warm. Not threatening either. Just careful. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice barely there. He sighed. "You don't know me, but I know about you. And I know about Ramona." I didn't speak. Couldn't. I felt like my brain had hit a wall. Then he said something that made my spine go cold. "She's been playing both of us." That snapped me out of it. "What are you talking about? Who the hell are you?" "My name's Walter. I'm Brandon's uncle. And you deserve to know what they're planning." I stood up too fast and hit my leg on the corner of the motel table. The sting grounded me, if only for a second. Walter told me he'd found the emails accidentally. Brandon had been staying at his place off and on after losing his job a few months ago. One night, Walter had gone onto the shared computer to print something and found a folder of saved messages between Brandon and Ramona. Some dating back almost a year. "She's been telling him she's stuck with you for now, that you're soft but loyal, and that she's waiting for the right time to walk away clean," he said. "But Brandon isn't planning on staying with her either." Wait, what? Apparently, Brandon had been bragging to a friend, someone who later talked to Walter, that once Ramona's money cleared from her inheritance next month, he was going to disappear for a while and ghost her. The retreat? Just a last indulgence. "She thinks she's in control," Walter added, his voice suddenly harder. "But she's just the next fool in his pattern." I sat back down slowly, the old mattress groaning beneath me. My stomach felt like it was turning over inside itself. For a brief, delusional moment, I actually felt bad for her. For Ramona. And then I remembered the sound of her laugh while she whispered about how suffocating I was. I asked Walter why he was telling me this. "Why now?" He paused before saying, "Because I've watched my nephew ruin 3 people like this before, and I see how close you are to being number 4. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the folder again. I reread the messages, and somewhere around 3 a.m., I started drafting something of my own. Not a confrontation, not a threat, just a story. The kind that might leave a bruise without ever raising a hand. I didn't know if I'd use it. I wasn't even sure who I was anymore. But one thing was clear. If I had once been a doormat, I was no longer lying flat. The next morning, I drove back to the house. I didn't go inside. I just stood across the street and watched as she stepped out, wearing gym leggings and that fake smile she saved for the world. She didn't see me, But I saw her, and in her hand was a new envelope. That's when I realized this wasn't just emotional betrayal. There was something bigger going on. I just had no idea how far she'd already gone behind my back. There's a kind of silence that hits you when you realize someone wasn't just lying to your face. They were building an entire world behind your back. It's not the kind of silence that's peaceful. It's hollow, empty in a way that echoes, like your own life is mocking you in slow motion. That's what I felt when I opened the bank app on my phone later that day. Not for any real reason. I wasn't expecting anything. I just wanted to know if I could afford another few nights at the motel. I had around $2,400 left in checking the last time I looked. Enough to drift without alarming anyone. But now, $73.16. I blinked. Hit refresh. Same. I checked savings. I nearly dropped my phone. Gone. Every dollar. Years of careful deposits. All of it emptied. At first, I thought it was fraud. A scam. I even called the bank and sat on hold for 22 agonizing minutes with tinny jazz playing in my ear. When a tired-sounding woman named April finally came on the line, she asked me a few questions to verify my identity, then pulled up my activity. She said the transfers were internal, initiated from my account to another under the same joint authorization. My voice cracked. Joint? As in my wife? April's pause told me everything. Yes, sir. All transfers were made to an account ending in 9947. That matches another cardholder linked to your checking and savings. Ramona. It wasn't just emotional betrayal anymore. It was financial, strategic, cold. She hadn't just planned to leave me. She planned to leave me with nothing. I hung up and sat frozen, phone on the bed, eyes burning. I wasn't angry, not at first. I was humiliated. I'd worked those extra hours, budgeted like an accountant, passed on things I wanted for years just so we could have a safety net. And she ripped it away without blinking, just like she'd ripped away everything else. And for what? A man like Brandon? A short-term thrill with no job, no morals, and a history of ghosting women after draining their wallets? I thought back to the envelope I saw her carrying that morning. That wasn't a gym bag. It was a padded courier envelope, thick and sealed, probably financial documents. She was covering her tracks. I was being erased on paper before she even told me it was over. But what she didn't know was that I had already made a copy of everything in that folder. The emails, the flight bookings, even the flirty little "wish you were in my shower right now" messages Brandon thought no one else would ever see. Walter had been right. She thought she was in control. But the truth was, she didn't even realize the fire she'd lit under her own feet. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do next. I wasn't the revenge type. I wasn't going to blow up her car or storm into her studio screaming. That's not who I am. Never was. But I did have a printer, a USB drive, and a long memory of every person who ever told me I was too nice to ever do something bold. That afternoon, I printed one letter. Just one. Sealed it. And I mailed it to someone I knew Ramona couldn't ignore. Her mother. That was the beginning. Because if Ramona wanted to play chess, she should have known I've spent most of my life studying the board, while everyone else thought I was just polishing the pieces. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened 2 days later, when her mom called me directly and told me something I never could have imagined. I'm not even sure how to explain it. The thing about silence is that once you sit in it long enough, it starts to talk back. It fills in gaps you didn't know were there. Every pause, every minute without a call, becomes a paragraph in a story you were never told. By the time my phone finally rang 2 days after I sent that letter, I already had 100 versions of how it might go. But none of them matched what actually happened. Her mother, Linda, was not the type of woman you'd expect to fall apart. Former Navy wife, sharp as a razor, once sewed an entire prom dress overnight because Ramona changed her mind the day before. We'd always had a polite but stiff relationship. She thought I was soft, too sentimental, not nearly ambitious enough. But she never said it directly. She didn't have to. Her raised eyebrows did the talking. So when I saw her name flash across my screen, I hesitated. I thought maybe she'd call to defend Ramona, to scold me for snooping or blame me for whatever version of the story her daughter had already told. Instead, she just said, "Ellwood, I got your letter, and I think it's time you knew the truth." I said nothing at first. She didn't wait. "Ramona isn't who you think she is," she began. "I've spent years hoping she'd change, but she never really grew out of what she started in high school. She uses people, Ellwood. She collects loyalty like it's currency and cashes it in when it suits her. And you? You were the safest bet she ever made." My throat dried up. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I saw what she did to her father before he passed," she said. "And now she's doing it to you, and I'm tired of staying quiet just to keep the peace." She took a deep breath. "The inheritance? It was yours too. You were named in the original will." I blinked. "What?" "She had it changed months before he passed," Linda continued. "Manipulated him. Said you two were planning to separate, that you weren't emotionally stable to handle a sudden windfall. So she asked him to amend the document privately. He didn't tell me at the time. I only found out after he died. I was furious, but she threatened to cut me off. Said she'd make sure I never saw a penny, and frankly, I was exhausted. I didn't have the energy to fight her. I stood up, heart pounding, pacing the stained motel carpet. "So she... what? Stole it?" Linda didn't answer right away. Then, calmly, she said, "She diverted the money into a private account before probate finished. Had help from some slimy lawyer her friend knew. It wasn't technically illegal, but it was deeply unethical. She erased you from that legacy, Ellwood. And now she's doing the same thing to your marriage. I warned her, told her not to underestimate you." I pressed the phone harder to my ear. "Why are you really helping me?" A pause. Then, with a bitterness I hadn't expected, she said, "Because I'm tired of watching her ruin good people. And because I think you might be the only person left who's still decent enough not to destroy her completely, even though you could." I didn't speak. Couldn't. My mind was unraveling. Years of little moments snapping into place like puzzle pieces finally finding their home. The coldness. The detachment. The way she'd always taken control of our finances and convinced me it was easier if she just handled everything. It wasn't convenience. It was groundwork. Linda told me she still had copies of the original will and of the revised one. She offered to send them. I told her yes, not because I wanted to sue, not yet, but because I needed to see with my own eyes just how deep Ramona had dug this hole beneath my feet. After we hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I went to the corner diner. I ordered a grilled cheese sandwich and a root beer float. I sat in a booth by the window like I was a normal person having a normal day. But I wasn't. I was the ghost of a husband whose marriage had already been cremated. He just hadn't gotten the ashes yet. And that's when the next message came in. This time from a blocked number. One line of text. "You're going to regret what you started." I didn't know if it was from her, from Brandon, from someone else entirely. But I stared at that message for 5 minutes straight. And then I smiled. Because I didn't start this. But I was damn sure going to finish it. The envelope from Linda arrived 2 days later. Heavy. Unassuming. It was stuffed with paper, receipts, copies of the original will, handwritten notes with post-its labeling key phrases, and a typed-up summary in Linda's stern, clinical voice. "In the event this goes legal, this is what you'll need." She didn't even sign it. Just underlined one sentence 3 times. "This inheritance was never meant to exclude you." I held it in my hands like a loaded weapon. Because that's what it was now, evidence. Not just of deception, but of intention. Ramona hadn't just drifted away. She'd designed a future where I didn't exist. Financially, emotionally, historically. But I wasn't interested in dragging this to court yet. That would be her game. Lawyers. Control. Silence. She wins in silence. I needed something louder, so I called Marcia. Now, most people wouldn't think to call their ex-wife's old college roommate, especially one you hadn't spoken to in over 5 years. But I remembered one thing clearly about Marcia. She never liked being lied to, and she didn't like Ramona when Ramona got smug. I told her everything. I didn't even need to convince her. She already knew something was off. Apparently, Ramona had been floating a version of our story to her friends for months. How I'd grown paranoid. How I was emotionally manipulative. How she was preparing to leave with nothing, just peace. I could practically hear Marcia's jaw tighten on the other end of the line. "You still in touch with Kelsey and Dan?" I asked. "Yeah, why?" "Because they're all invited to the art showcase this Saturday, aren't they?" "Ramona's showcase? Her watercolors?" "Yes." "I'd like to come." The silence was short. Oh my God. You want them to know." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Saturday arrived with a chill in the air that cut right through my coat. I wore a gray sweater. One Ramona had once said made me look invisible. That felt fitting. I parked across from the community center where the event was being held. Her name was printed on the banner out front. Ramona Merrick, Colors of Stillness. Stillness. The irony was bitter. I waited until most people had arrived. Friends, colleagues, even her mother was there, standing stiffly near a tray of white wine and grapes. The moment I walked in, Ramona spotted me, and her face collapsed in a dozen unreadable ways. First confusion, then panic, then a smile so fake it nearly cracked. "Ellwood," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "I didn't know you were coming." "I didn't want to miss the woman of the hour," I replied, handing her a wrapped package. It was small, soft. She looked at it warily but didn't open it. She nodded toward the corner, signaling she wanted to speak privately. But I didn't follow. Instead, I stepped up beside the microphone at the edge of the gallery. "I'll be quick," I said, tapping it gently. Ramona turned to stone. "I just wanted to say how incredible it is to see someone put so much emotion into their art," I began. "Especially someone who's mastered the art of hiding the truth in plain sight." A few heads turned. Some nervous laughter. Ramona stepped forward, panic rising in her eyes. I kept going. "You see, when someone paints peace but lives in betrayal, that contradiction becomes the real masterpiece. When someone lies to friends, family, and even lawyers, well, that's when the story gets interesting." "Ellwood," she said sharply, voice tightening. "This isn't the place." "No," I agreed. "But the truth never has good timing, does it?" I didn't mention Brandon. Not yet. I didn't expose the money. But I let people wonder. I let the tension settle like dust on glass. Enough for people to look at her differently. Enough for questions to bloom. And I handed the microphone back like nothing had happened. She chased me outside minutes later. "You're insane," she hissed. "Do you know what you've done?" "I gave them what you never gave me," I said calmly. "A hint." She opened the gift in her hands. Inside was a copy of the will, original and revised. Highlighted. Annotated. Annotated in blue ink, like the kind she always used when she forged notes for me to sign back in the early days of our joint taxes. "You don't want to play this game with me, Elle?" she whispered. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes were sharp but unsteady. Her hands trembled. Her calm was unraveling. "Then maybe," I said, stepping back into the cold. "You shouldn't have started it." She didn't follow me, but someone else did. A woman I didn't recognize slipped outside after me, called my name quietly, and handed me a folded piece of paper. "You don't know me," she said, "but I know Brandon, and you should read this before things get worse." She walked away before I could ask anything. What was written inside that letter? I didn't expect it. I didn't want it. But it changed everything. I didn't open the letter right away. Couldn't. Not because I was scared of what it might say, but because I already knew deep down that once I did, things would cross a line I couldn't come back from. And something about the way that woman handed it to me, the urgency in her voice, the weight behind her eyes. It felt final. I sat in my car with the engine running, hands on the steering wheel, just staring at it. The envelope was folded in half, worn at the edges. No name on it. No return address. Just a faint imprint on the paper, like it had been carried for a long time. Like maybe she hadn't planned to give it to me at all, until now. I finally opened it in the parking lot of a supermarket 20 miles from town, where no one knew my face and I didn't have to pretend to hold myself together. And as I unfolded the first page, my stomach turned before my eyes even reached the words. It wasn't written by the woman who gave it to me. It was from Brandon's ex-fiancée. Her name was Sarah, and she didn't waste time on sympathy. The first line punched like a hammer. If you're reading this, it means she's making the same mistake I did. She went on to describe a man I didn't recognize because I never really knew him. Brandon wasn't just a womanizer. He was dangerous, manipulative in ways that went far beyond flirtation or infidelity. According to Sarah, he had a history of getting women to open accounts in their name, convincing them to co-sign loans, even talking them into selling assets for joint ventures that never existed. Once he'd squeezed them dry, financially, emotionally, he'd vanish. No social media, no forwarding address, just radio silence. She said she'd spent nearly 2 years recovering from what he'd done. Credit destroyed, trust shattered, and when she finally tracked him down through a friend of a friend, she found him using a different last name, living in a borrowed condo, already charming someone new. I don't know what your story is with him, she wrote, but if he's near your wife, she's not the one pulling strings anymore. She's just another puppet, and by the time she realizes it, she'll be broke and alone. My hands shook. For a moment, I actually felt sorry for Ramona. I don't know why. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was still that broken part of me. The part that couldn't detach from her no matter how many knives she'd twisted into my back. But then I remembered everything she'd taken. Not just money, not just love, but time, energy. Years of my life given to someone who was rehearsing a lie with every smile. I closed the letter and started my car. I didn't know where I was going yet. I didn't need to. I just needed to keep moving, to think. But I didn't get far, because halfway down the highway my phone rang. Private number again. Same voice. Ramona. I saw you talk to someone at the gallery, she said. Her tone wasn't angry. It was controlled, like someone rehearsing a speech they didn't want to give. She gave me a letter, I said flatly. From Brandon's ex. You want to talk about it? Silence. Then, you don't understand, Elle. He's not who I thought he was. That was Rich. I pulled off to the side of the road and laughed. Actually laughed. The sound startled even me. No, Ramona. You're not who I thought you were. And now you've finally found your match. You have no idea how dangerous he is, she said, voice suddenly shaking. No, I replied. But I'm about to find out. I hung up. That night, I drove to Walter's house, Brandon's uncle. The one who had warned me before. I didn't call first. I didn't ask for permission. I just showed up. When he opened the door and saw me holding the letter, he didn't ask any questions. Come in, he said, stepping aside. I figured you'd be back. We sat in his dark kitchen, a pot of stale coffee between us, the sound of wind rattling the back windows. He read the letter without blinking. When he finished, he pushed his glasses up and said something that chilled me to the bone. I told Ramona to stay away from him months ago, told her he wasn't who he pretended to be. She laughed, said she was too smart to get played. He leaned forward. She's not laughing anymore. He handed me a flash drive. What's on it? I asked. Proof, he said. But if you use it, things will explode. This isn't just personal anymore. This could ruin careers, lives. I pocketed it. And in that moment, I made a decision I hadn't expected from myself. I wasn't going to burn her world down. I was going to let her light the match herself. The flash drive sat in my pocket for 3 days. I didn't open it. I didn't upload anything. I didn't email it to her studio board or post it on social media like a digital Molotov cocktail. Because in those 3 days, I realized something important. I didn't need to destroy Ramona to get my closure. She was already doing that herself. What I needed was to walk out of this story holding on to something she could never touch again. My peace. I filed the report with the bank. Quietly. No fireworks. Just facts. The will, the transfer history, Walter's statement, and the letter from Sarah. It was enough for a financial investigation to begin. Her accounts were frozen temporarily. I received a call confirming that the bulk of my savings would be restored within the next few weeks. Not all, but enough. Ramona tried to contact me for more times. First calls, then emails, then a voicemail that started strong, defiant, but cracked near the end. She didn't apologize. Not exactly. What she said was more of a confession without the courage behind it. Something about how she didn't realize what she was losing, and how Brandon had turned out to be more complicated than expected. Complicated. That was her word for betrayal. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on building something real again. I moved into a small rental near the edge of town, a quiet place with creaky floors and a backyard that backed up into a trailhead. I started walking more. I finally read the books that sat untouched for years. I started writing again. Badly at first, but it didn't matter. For the first time in years, my thoughts didn't revolve around keeping someone else happy. One night, as the sun was setting, Linda came by. She brought a bottle of red wine and a tin of lemon cookies. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't need to. We talked like two people who had both seen someone they loved become a stranger. And before she left, she said, "You didn't just survive her, Ellwood. You outgrew her." That stuck with me. So, when Ramona showed up at my door one last time, I knew exactly what to do. She looked thinner, makeup faded. Her voice shook as she asked if we could have a moment. I stepped outside but never let her in. She said she wasn't with Brandon anymore. She said she didn't know who she was when we were married. She said she didn't know if she could fix it, but she was sorry. I just nodded and said, "Thank you. I wish you well." And I meant it, because holding on to that bitterness, that wouldn't make me stronger. Letting it go, that gave me everything back. She left, quietly, and that night, I slept for 8 uninterrupted hours. No anger, no aching chest, just breath. So yeah, this is where it ends. If you've made it this far, thank you. You were my lighthouse during the darkest part of my storm. And if you've ever had someone betray your trust, tell me in the comments. What moment finally made you walk away? Or stay stronger? I'd love to hear your stories, because healing doesn't happen in silence. It happens in connection. You've been watching Reddit Confessions, and this one was mine. Until next time.